I do want to ask Ryan Bass, our environmental planner coordinator, to come up and help us with our next city manager's Boerne Listens citizen survey presentation. There wasn't a specific look in the survey about environmental responsibility or environmental conservation. There was several different aspects throughout the survey that touched on it. And because under our strategy map there's an environmental responsibility component right under our mission statement, I thought it was important to highlight this aspect of the survey because we did receive a lot of comments from our residents about that. And so, as you know, we'll go to the next slide. We did this survey at the end of 2024. We had 75 city resident responses out of that just under 1,600 surveys. Another 25% in the resident or in the non-resident county area. Surveyed all kinds of things that had to do with development, growth, city amenities, benefits, safety, security, mobility, and so forth. Next. Here are just some of the slides. Like, for example, under the growth and development perspective, there's two areas that kind of got around the conservation or environmental aspect, having to, how are we doing with incorporating conservation-minded principles into our building standards. You'll see through a lot of these slides that I'll show you where the satisfaction is very poor. They'll show it as important or in the mid-range. I will tell you they're just probably not aware of the good things we do have in place that we've put in place in the last several years with the UDC, with Ryan's focus on some conservation programs, rebate programs, things of that nature. So I'm very hopeful that tonight's presentation will continue the good communication, presentation, outreach that he's been doing. Next, you see more about managing the city's water resources. Of course, Director Mann has given us a good presentation on that. Conservation efforts and programs. Next. Even when we asked what can we do to improve mobility in the community, we still had a lot of stuff about water resource management and environmental conservation pop up under the survey responses. Next. The one highlight here I'd like to point out is, and we've heard this a lot, Director Woods in their visitor center will tell us all the time, visitors who come here remark about how clean downtown is, how clean around our trails and parks they are, and so even our residents have given us a very high satisfaction mark there. Next. There's a lot, you guys have seen this, there's a lot of desire for more open space preservation, more parks. We would like to buy more land to do that. We're in the middle of a lot of infrastructure expansion in the park range, and we have other park acreage that we own that we'd like to develop down the road or preserve as well. All right, with that, I think next we'll get into the district comments. So we'll start off with Mayor Pro Tem Willison.
I'd like to see Boerne require more from developers in the way of conservation practices. For example, rainwater capture and use of at least 60% native plants in their landscaping. And we need to support solar residential installations.
Councilmember Bateman.
Save the trees. Beautiful oaks are removed instead of building designs that incorporate the trees. We need to manage natural resources. Codes for less concrete and more protections for groundwater retention and purity are important.
Councilmember Scott.
The destruction of a few natural spaces we have seems like a cash grab and a disregard for the local population as a whole. And water is a precious resource and is continuing to dwindle. It is important to be creative and find other solutions not to overuse groundwater.
Councilmember Bunker.
Seeing a beautiful grove of trees, watching wildlife that has survived can be a time to reflect. Balance of preserving green space and wildlife within the city growth is much needed. My house was surrounded by forest for decades, but that's all been plowed down for apartments and tract homes.
Councilmember Macaluso.
Utilize more spaces for more fields. Keep the trees. Please keep the hill country feel of Boerne, limit knocking down trees, promote parks, open spaces, hiking trails.
And Mayor Ritchie.
Embrace the Texas hill country by showcasing the actual outdoor space. I don't believe that continued growth is necessarily a good thing for Boerne, especially given the scarcity of water and lack of rainfall. But I'm also not certain that you have much ability to control the growth.
All right, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ryan to talk about what we are doing, what we can do, and actually what we aren't allowed to do.
Yeah, thank you, Council. Mayor, I appreciate you having me tonight. I think we all see a theme there in the comments on the citizen survey, and it is the displeasure with seeing trees removed, especially on large scale, and its water conservation efforts. So I wanted to start out just by promoting, what are the desired outcomes of our conservation programs? That is to promote tree preservation where we can on development projects, and to promote tree health and to work to maintain healthy trees within the community. Again, water conservation and watershed protection efforts. We are really rolled out programs that are emphasizing and help manage those two tenets underneath our environmental responsibility section of the strategy map. And then protecting groundwater recharge and preserving our night skies, our dark skies. We heard a lot about dark skies tonight. I think that maybe this presentation tonight will shed a little bit of light on the things that we're doing to make sure that we enforce dark sky regulations and try to preserve our good hill country dark skies. Some of the things that we do initially in the development phase is ask for a land study. This is something that wasn't historically allowed during the plating phase, but a House bill that passed over the last few years prohibits us now from gathering this type of information during plating. The reason that it's important during that phase before we establish lot lines, easement boundaries, drainage ways, is that if we know we have environmentally sensitive features on a property, we can then work around those things to help preserve those things. Those aren't deal killers, those aren't project killers, those are just ways that we can use tools to help try to preserve some of those sensitive features, namely when it comes to groundwater protections. So we require during the development process a tree inventory that we field check and verify for its accuracy. We ask for an inventory of natural features memo. That's to give us a better idea of any really significant special features that are on the property that you can't see from an aerial image or just a tree survey. If we have properties that fall within our lower Glen Rose protection zone, we require a geologic survey to be provided. And this is where we start looking at groundwater preservation. We're trying to identify, maybe caves or karst features that facilitate the transfer of surface water to groundwater to replenish our aquifers. We want to be sure that we are not contaminating aquifers. We want to promote groundwater recharge where we can to help ensure that we do not see large-scale depletions in our water tables. And we can trigger some protective measures, mainly looking at what the Edwards Aquifer Authority does when they run across a sensitive recharge feature. We would trigger those types of protections on a property. And then habitat assessment. So if we have a new development over 10 acres in size, we ask for a habitat assessment to look at habitat compliance for threatened and endangered species. And so we haven't had too many projects that triggered the habitat assessment requirement, but it is there, and I think that's a valuable tool in our toolkit when it comes to our environmental responsibility. So again, trees being the top point to mention in our survey, wanted to highlight our urban and community forestry program. This was rolled out in 2019. It coincided very nicely with the Unified Development Code, gave us a great opportunity to really beef up our tree preservation requirements. This is where we increased our preservation rates on the property, we increased our planting ratios to offset for tree loss, and we increased the fee in lieu of amounts for options where people have to pay. If they can't preserve, they can't plant to offset tree loss, then there's a way they can pay into our tree restoration fund. It's really valuable that this program is located in our planning department because we get to have conversations on tree preservations from day one on a project. So if we identify large trees, especially our heritage trees, we're working with the development community, the developers and the engineers to maybe look at site plan adjustments to help preserve some of these trees on site. The one thing that everyone is probably not aware of is that within the state of Texas, the community not being aware of, is that in the state of Texas, by state law, we cannot deny someone the right to remove a tree from their property. What a municipality can do, though, is have a tree preservation ordinance and enforce mitigation for tree loss. So properties within the ETJ, properties in the county proper, there are no tree preservation requirements. All trees on site can be removed. Recently had a project this week that I think caught a lot of people off guard with some large-scale tree removal. It caught me off guard when I saw it. I thought we might have had an unauthorized tree removal on our hands, and so immediately pulled up our interactive maps, saw that it was outside the city limits. Therefore, there was nothing that the city, no authority the city had to enforce preservation requirements on a project like that. So when we do have the ability to enforce mitigation, and we look at our preservation rates, and we look at replanting ratios, and even the dollar amount typically triggers site plan revisions. We saw a great example of this with the Honda project, where we drastically improved the tree preservation on site that eliminated any need for them to plant additional trees or pay into our tree restoration fund. But in options where we do have payments going to the fund, I'd like to highlight what that fund does and what that money supports. And that money goes right back into the community to support tree health, tree canopy preservation, and the most important thing it probably does is help support our oak wilt management programs. And that's where we can provide financial reimbursements to people who proactively treat trees that are prone to oak wilt, they're fighting active oak wilt infections, or they can remove trees on their property that have just been killed by oak wilt, especially infected red oaks. We want to have those red oaks off the landscape immediately, and we almost pay for the full tree removal of an infected red oak that has come down with oak wilt. We've used our tree restoration dollars over the last 2 years to support some riparian restoration projects, going in and behind some construction projects where we've seen tree loss along our urban stream corridors, and we've gone in and planted cypress, pecans, sycamores, riparian species that, again, play a role in big picture items of water quality, aquatic life use, and flood mitigation strategies. We hosted a big tree giveaway event last year, really successful. We're hoping to do the same this year. We applied for the same Apache grant, asked for 300 trees this year for the giveaway event, so we should know if we get awarded for that grant here in the next month or so. And then we're able to use that money to maintain trees on city property. We've got some significant oak wilt mortality in our cemetery that we're about to initiate a project to remove those trees, especially as they become hazards to visitors to the cemetery. We use that money on the River Road Park project. There's we've done hazard tree removals, so it's a valuable resource to us to have to work on the preservation and the health and maintenance of our urban forest canopy. And shift to water conservation, that's probably the number 2 item that we see. They may be 1A, 1B, but water conservation is highly important in our community. One thing that that we've received a lot of praise for from our environmental programs is the One Water Initiative. It's how all of our water is connected, how our water, we go from surface water to water treatment, to water distribution, to wastewater treatment, to effluent discharge, to a reclaim system with our purple pipe system, and the philosophy that water is all interconnected. And so One Water throughout the whole country is important, and I think we're a leader in the One Water philosophy. Again, mentioned our reclaimed water utility, vital to that, and our targeted outreach and education events. We've hosted multiple events over the last couple of years, specifically looking at water conservation strategies from rainwater harvesting to native landscaping, and even touching on low-impact development design. We rolled out our water conservation rebates, offering our rainwater harvesting, our irrigation system consultations, rain-free sensor, and the new turf grass replacement rebate. I know I've mentioned to you guys in past presentations, the irrigation system consultation is probably the best ROI on this. We see the most participants in that, and we're seeing the most repairs to homeowner residential irrigation systems based on this conservation rebate opportunity. I wanted to touch on residential and commercial landscaping because it does play an important role in our environmental responsibility. This is where we dictate, based on your lot frontage at the setback, the number of trees you're required to plant on a new property. We have some turf grass restrictions where we prohibit the installation of San Augustine. We have guidelines and guidance on how far away from your primary residential structure you can plant turf grass to try to kind of limit your irrigated area. A really significant water conservation strategy for some of our larger lots. We have this recommended planting list. One of the comments was promoting native plant use in our landscape designs. We have the recommended plant list in the UDC that we constantly refer people to, and it's a great vetted list developed by a whole team of people in the community and our local nonprofits, Native Plant Society, that we constantly send people to. We have lawn fertilization guidelines that play a role in our watershed protection efforts. As we look at nutrients that leave the site, this dictates the timing and quantity of nitrogen fertilization on turf grass. Xeriscape is a big topic of conversation right now as people do look to shrink their turf grass and they want to install more drought-tolerant landscapes. Xeriscape guidelines in our UDC talks about an 80-20 ratio of plants versus non-vegetative material, all drought-tolerant, native, local plants. And so we have that already in our guidance. And one thing that is sometimes a funny thing to look at is native landscaping is allowed with intent. So sometimes there is a fine line between what is a nuisance landscape and what is a very designated and intentional native landscape. And so our code enforcement sometimes gets calls on that, and we come in and talk with people about native landscaping. And then our irrigation systems, we've had some guidance in our UDC that relates to rain-free sensors being mandatory for all new irrigation systems, and backflow prevention on these systems are required. So these are key environmental features that have already been and live within our development, our UDC ordinance. Watershed protection, I mean, this is an effort that started back in 2009. It was my first job here at the city, and so the city has a long-running, standing record of working to address water quality concerns within the community. 2018, kind of as part of that effort, we adopted the Low Impact Development Technical Guidance Manual that our engineering mobility team use constantly. We have our long-term water quality monitoring program out at Boerne City Lake. We've been a long-time supporter and coordinator with the TCQ Clean Rivers program. Again, more outreach and education events on healthy lawn maintenance and things that homeowners can do to protect water quality in our urban streams. The biggest capital improvement project that we've done directly with environmental benefits was the River Road Park Bank Stabilization Project. Massive project that not only reduced erosion potential, it created a better visitor and user experience. We had the opportunity to address water quality problems that were long-standing with dissolved oxygen crashes and a lack of in-stream fish habitat. So by installing the aeration system component and working with BISD to get some fish structures in River Road Park, it was a nice capital improvement project to directly address water quality concerns. So dark skies. We had a dark sky ordinance in place right prior to the UDC. We rolled it into the UDC, and it is something that for every commercial project that comes down the line right now that is an applicant within the city has to meet our dark sky requirements. So the primary goals of that is to ensure that all lighting on site is a downlight, so it's a full cutoff. There's no uplighting allowed on any commercial project or any project within the city. We do not have any off-site light trespass. We look at the color of the light to make sure that you're on the warmer side and not the extremely bright blue, white, harsh lights. And we require photometric analysis. So we look at the average lighting load across the entire project. And these are based on a residential, commercial, or industrial zoning classification. People often ask, how do existing non-compliant lights come into compliance? And so our really only opportunity to do that is when someone applies for a permit. So if a residential project wants to add on a man cave, we look at their site, we see that they have some floodlights, they've got off-site light issues. We work with them at that point to be sure that they do an exchange out of those fixtures to be dark sky compliant. We do receive complaints. We do have had some pretty kind of egregious off-site light work, big square halogen lights shining off onto people's properties, and code enforcement will engage them, and we will talk to them about retrofits at that point if we do receive complaints. And community engagement. It's one thing I always say about kind of environmental concerns is it's hard for the government to come in and just flip a switch. It's very rare that we can come in and solve the problem. It requires actions throughout the community. So we try to provide as many outreach and education opportunities as we can to educate people on the right and wrong ways to do things. So the Healthy Lawns, Healthy Waters program, we've done that with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension for quite a few years now. We just hosted a Texas Watershed Stewards workshop with AgriLife. Thursday, we're hosting a Texas Well Owners Network program, again with AgriLife, where people on a well can bring their water samples off tomorrow and drop off samples at the Cow Creek Groundwater Conservation District or at the Kendall County Ag Extension Office. They'll run tests overnight and to come to the workshop on Thursday. It's a 4-hour workshop, talk about wells, well construction, aquifers, aquifer protections, and get your results from your lab samples. Again, hosting some dark sky outreach events. A really successful program that we've done with the communications team puts together is our HOA neighborhood meetings, and that gives every department an opportunity to sit down in front of HOA leadership and do essentially an update on what we have going on throughout the community. We host a Q&A at the end. A lot of that Q&A turns into trees, lighting, and water conservation. So it's another opportunity to just get information to our residents. Our communication team does a great job in assisting us with social media outreach, and then we've had a chance to get on Boerne Radio, do the Civil and Nature Center podcast, and again, talk about our environmental programs and concerns in the community and the ways that we're working to address those. And so I have to mention our local and regional nonprofits that we work with. All of these organizations here have an environmental program strategy. So again, some of our biggest partners here are the Cibolo Center for Conservation and the Hill Country Alliance. Native Plant Society and the Tester Master Naturalists do some amazing work with our demonstration gardens and some of the work on our public spaces. Dark Sky International has been a great resource when we've had challenging lighting issues, especially on some like car dealerships or some of our larger commercial projects. They're really great, kind of almost a free consultation service that we're able to lean on. Again, you get down to Tree City USA, Keep Texas Beautiful goes right in hand with our Parks and Recreation stream corridor cleanup events that we do. Again, I think that goes into why we see such a positive reflection on how litter-free our community is. And then open space and parkland dedication. That's another thing that I think people always want to see. We want to see more open space and we want to see quality parkland. The Northside Park project, as Lisette mentioned tonight, I mean, it's going to be an amazing product at the end of the day. 97% tree preservation rates on that project. All dark sky compliant. It's going to be great. We were able to get 2 recent parkland dedications on some stream corridors, one on Frederick Creek as part of the Bluffview project and one on Browns Creek as part of the Collection at Boerne project. These are vital as we look to expand trail corridors and mobility access through the community. And most of these parkland dedications then allow us to protect those stream corridors and manage those under our park management plans. And the thing I would like to end with tonight is I hope people are starting to take more and more advantage of the Boerne City campus natural area. We have 13 acres right behind the library. Master Naturalist and Native Plant Society has done a fantastic job in their volunteer efforts. They've removed a ton of invasive species. We've planted over 100 trees, and they've constructed a half-mile mulch trails. And so there's it's just a really cool little escape right here behind our library that I hope people will take advantage of and kind of figure out that that's a new green space in the community that they can take advantage of. And so with that, from an environmental program standpoint, I'd happy to answer any questions. I know Director Mann has a couple slides here for some water issues at the lake.
Mayor Pro Tem?
I thought if you could maybe just connect some of these questions to some of the questions people had earlier on a project like Bucky's that has a development agreement and might not necessarily have to follow current rules, and like how it just
So good question. So I will tell you, and you guys know, that developments that are coming forward, when they get entitlement, they're working through the process, there's a vesting point where they are locked into a certain code that's available at that time. We update our code. We did the UDC. We did zoning category changes. And so that all impacts each project. And so when an application is submitted and accepted, then we lock in that set of code. And so we make sure every project is following the code at that time. And of course, as you heard Ryan say, we've had dark sky rules for a while. We've had all kinds of watershed protection rules. Some have gotten a lot stronger over the last several years. And so we adhere, we have developments and projects, applications adhere to what the code was required at the time they came forward. We don't, under state law, we're not allowed to just pick which code folks have to abide by. It gets locked in when they come forward to the city. And Mick, our city attorney, could probably elaborate on that a little bit more on other projects. Whenever a development comes forward, if you have legal questions along those lines, you can ask him. But
thanks, man.
Well, I wanted to say that the point you made earlier about state law and tree preservation is poorly understood by the community. I've had 2 projects, one which you're very familiar with, the development project on Norris Lane with the fast food establishments and where Sprouts is going, all that. And they paid a fee in lieu of. And just, I know you made great efforts to preserve trees or have mitigation. They have a right to do that. The project you're alluding to, I've also heard about, because people have complained that why did the city council allow all those trees to be cut down across from Home Depot and Whataburger where the Baptist Hospital is going? Well, it's not even in the city. It's not even in the ETJ anymore because they opted out. So if people have complaints, they should write to their state legislature or to the county commissioners. We have nothing to do with it. I agree it's a problem, but we can't enforce any rules.
But even on that, at the end of the day, we still can't prohibit someone from removing a tree. They
Exactly.
can pay
Even if it was governed by city, we still can prevent them from removing a tree if they chose to. But we could enforce financial penalties, et cetera. But we have nothing to do whatsoever in terms of input over that project across from Home Depot.
I have a question for you, Mr. Bass. Have you been working with engineers at all on the Adler Road expansion on preservation of trees along that road expansion?
We did. I did talk to our engineering and mobility team on that. I haven't worked directly with consulting engineers, but we looked at some of the trees that were in conflict with the road widening and the right-of-way widths that were necessary for them to complete that work and ensure that drainage was going to be, adequately handled on that property or on that project. And some of those trees, even though they're in a protected class, they are within the right-of-way widths that we need for that. I haven't worked on it in great detail. Dr. Carroll could give us some more specifics on it, but we did go out and take a look at some of those trees to see if there was anything we could do, and most of them are just going to be in conflict with the project, unfortunately. There's some things we can work around. Sidewalks, we have a lot more flexibility in working around trees. We've done that on some of our sidewalk expansion work, working with the property owner to go back behind the tree. We've shrunken the road a little bit to get the sidewalk on the street side, but roadway alignments sometimes are a challenge more than like a sidewalk project.
Are we adhering to the same standards of tree preservation? If we take one down, we're going to go plant some equal amount or compensate for our taking it?
Yes, sir. I try to pride ourselves on the fact that we apply our rules equally to us. When it comes to dark skies, when it comes to tree preservation, I never want there to be an opportunity for someone to come back and say that the city doesn't follow their own rules. And so we do through tree planting. We're fortunate enough to have property within the city that we can plant to offset. A lot of people don't, which is why the fee in lieu of is in place. They don't have, some of the large trees they take off on small acreage properties. They just don't have the space to justifiably ecologically replant the amount of trees required. So we do work with our Parks and Recreation Department to go back and plant trees on our property.
Will you publicly clarify the tree fund? Because people ask me all the time, I don't see any trees being planted. I said, well, they're being planted, but where are they planted?
We've been focusing on Cibolo Creek at Northrop Park. We planted trees on Frederick Creek in an agreement with the Woods of Frederick Creek Homeowners Association because it was ecologically kind of scored high to try to go in and reestablish, remove some exotics and reestablish the canopy there that was after a sewer main extension project. And then at the Northrop Park or the Northside Park project, we're going to plant a ton of trees on that property.
My point being that you have to plant them on city property or on property that has been cooperatively agreed to be planted. We can't just plant trees at somebody's yard or wherever we want.
That is correct. We try to plant trees only on our property. We don't want to provide. Trees are a financial asset. They are something that increases property values, that shortens the duration of days on market. There's a health benefits. It's nice to have trees on your property, and so we only plant trees on property under control by the city. And the trees that have been all planted back here on this 13 acres. Almost all those trees were dedicated through our urban forestry program and the Apache grant that we were able to get.
If there's no other questions for Ryan, I'm going to ask Director Mann to come up. I did want him to speak to some of the water quality. You've heard his great comprehensive water presentations, but we have had some comments about water taste and smell lately. We've had that multiple times the last several years about the geosmin, so I'm going to ask Director Mann to speak to that.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So some of you have heard this stuff from me before, and some of you haven't, and I'll be brief as you want me to be. But there are a couple of facts to get out. We are dealing with two type of mined issues right now. First, you know that we have sent out notices of DBPs that were beyond concentration levels. Disinfection byproducts happen when the chlorine disinfectant interacts with microscopic organics. That's been an issue for the city of Boerne since we've been using a lake, but as our groundwater percentage has decreased, the concentration has inversely gone up. Last July, we tried to save too much groundwater and we didn't put enough in, and we got some abnormally high numbers for that quarter of testing. Unfortunately, the way the state calculates the average, that number has affected us 3 out of the last 4 quarters. Now, July of this year, that number will drop off, and we have been treating to standards ever since. We have made corrections. We have been using not as much groundwater as we can, but enough. And so we're gonna handle that issue. The other is geosmin. Potato, is it geosmin or geosmin? Today I'm saying geosmin. But as those things, how do those things interact? So they're really unrelated, but surface water is the main problem for both of them. Groundwater treatment really, in our area, groundwater doesn't require additional treatment. We just inject chlorine into it to keep the chlorine residual in the system up as required by TCEQ in case something happens to contaminate the system, and it's just to help keep the water clean. We don't have to clean that water anymore, we just chlorinate it. Any surface water or groundwater under the influence of surface water must be treated. We don't have any groundwater under the influence of surface water, but we do have a lake. GBRA has a lake. That surface water has to go through a treatment process to remove pollutants. And again, Mother Nature does a great job, a better job of removing organics than the treatment process typically for those waters. Gets it to safe drinking water standards, but there are still some microscopic organics. When we chlorinate surface water, we start to form DBPs. When we chlorinate groundwater, we do not. So keeping that concentration at the right level and keeping that groundwater mixed, which is not uniform in the system, is important. That's why we have to do flushing. We have reduced groundwater in the mix. I think I read today that Cow Creek reduced their restrictions, but again, over time, our percentage of groundwater will go down. As we're buying more water from GBRA, that percentage will continue to go down. And so what are we doing? The new plant, we are just about done with sampling. We are done with sampling for the pilot study. So in other words, the next thing to happen is to look at the results of that pilot study and choose a treatment process. I will tell you preliminary results are that the process that we're looking at using for this newer plant, which is ozone and carbon filtration, will inherently decrease DBPs and the formation of geosmin. There was no geosmin outbreak while we were, or geosmin noticeable while we were sampling. But again, we know it happens from time to time. I've seen it happen probably 10 times. Most people didn't realize I'm very sensitive to it. This current issue that we're dealing with geosmin, I noticed about 2 weeks ago when I was brushing my teeth. The water we drink goes through a refrigerated carbon filter, so I don't notice it when I drink it, but I do when I brush my teeth. Notice it when I smell in the shower. I think we've been at it for about 2 weeks, and hopefully it won't last much longer. But again, the new plant will have better organics removal that will help with DBPs, that will help with geosmin formation. It'll be about 4 years before it's online. So what do we plan to do in the meantime? Well, first of all, when the new plant is online, we still plan to use our old plant. It works. We just got to keep those concentrations down for the things we become sensitive to. When we mix the water between the two plants, will be inherently better, closer to a groundwater treatment level at the new plant from a DBP and geosmin formation. But at the existing plant, in the near term and for the long term, we are under design, as you know, for a granular activated carbon filter. It's going to take at least a year to get it designed and installed. That will allow us to treat as much of a significant portion of the water that goes out of the plant and therefore reduce those concentrations to hopefully below noticeable levels. So some people, especially with geosmin, are very, very sensitive. Some don't notice it at all. Most of us that are average, what I would call, can notice it right now. And hopefully, again, that will be over with quickly. The DBP formation issue, we're just going to have to manage because we are a surface water city from now until forever, until TCEQ decides that it's not important anymore, which is unlikely. So that was not a regulated contaminant component back in the 70s and 70s when our plant was designed. It became regulated in the early 2000s, so that's why the plant wasn't designed to treat it. It does treat some, just not enough, and the GAC will help. So those are a few facts that are pertinent to the two issues that are top of mind right now, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Ryan. Mayor and Council, that's it for my report. I appreciate your your attention tonight. We had a lot of thorough presentations. I want to thank my staff for their cooperation, participation in the budget. Many months has gone into that. Of course, we're all available over the course of the next 2 weeks, the next month. As you all consider that, if you have any specific questions about any of that, please reach out to any one of us. Anyway, that's all I have.
All right.